For USCFootball.com, I'm Keely Eure here with Chris Treviño for instant analysis of USC's Wednesday practice of Stanford week. Now, this is the day where we can only see 50 minutes of practice, so I think the most interesting thing to come out of today was talking to USC's defensive players and coaches, especially because we didn't really get a chance to talk to the coaches following the impressive performance against San Jose State on Saturday. Specifically, defensive coordinator Todd Orlando, he was kind of like, I'm good, and kept walking up the tunnel. So we finally got to corner him a little bit and ask him what his evaluation was of his defense on Saturday.
Very quickly, I just want to point out this is my first night instant analysis. The lights are on me.
I hope it's not giving Blair Witch Project vibes.
It does a little bit, but I'm just worried I'm going to crumble under this light in my face. But I'm going to do my best. But yes, what a flex by Todd Orlando saying, no, I'm good. I don't want to talk after probably one of the best performances his defense has put on since he's been at USC. But he was very complimentary. He liked the plays that his players made. Obviously, as a coach, nothing is perfect. So he said, there's things we can work on. But overall, he thinks that they passed that first test. San Jose State, as people were talking about, is no cupcake. This is a championship team. They're going to be a good test for them. And he thinks they passed. Now, that being said, this week is another big test for them. It's the opening of Pac-12 play. It's Stanford. He said they're going to be going up against better athletes, faster athletes. So this is another test for them. They're unproven in that sense. So he's looking to go out there. Stanford is going to try to establish the run on them. That's what Stanford does. They're going to be physical, so they have to match that. So he's excited to see his guys go out and, live up and see what they do against this Cardinal offense. So that's going to be a big thing he's watching for, just seeing how his team matches up with that physicality, something that they've been working on, for the past 2 years, upping that physicality on defense. And I think they have so far. So it's going to be an interesting thing to watch on Saturday.
Now, if you wanted to nitpick or have one criticism of USC's defense on Saturday, they didn't record a sack. Now, they did get pressure, but they didn't record a sack. So Orlando was asked about that. Where did he land on the sack debate?
Right. He said, it's easy for people to get caught up in the statistics of sacks. And he said, but overall, he thought that they did a really good job with the pass rush. He was happy with the pass rush. He thought he got Nick Starkel off his spot. They made him uncomfortable. And, that makes sense. He had 2 interceptions. He passed for 308 yards, but it wasn't an efficient. It was sort of 52% completion percentage. So I think they did their part there. And he also liked that his rushers were coming in with more technical stuff. They were using specific hand movements. They were using their hands. They were getting in some, pass rushing moves. They weren't just running into blockers trying to get to the quarterback. So that's something you like to see. But I'm going to say, Todd Orlando said, sacks, you can get caught up with sacks, but sacks are cool, man. As someone who made a lot of sacks, we like to see stacks out there. So Lichtenstein told me on last Saturday that they're going to try to get more sacks on Saturday. So we see if that holds up. But yeah, that's kind of where he fell on the whole sack debate.
And Orlando was very complimentary of true freshman Keely Bullock, who made his first start in the Coliseum on Saturday. And he said, he looked really comfortable out there. He proved that he can be out there. And he actually went as far to say that he'll play a lot. And he said, as far as Isaiah Pola-Mao, he will be back. He expects him to be back for Saturday. But the problem is conditioning. So that's something to watch for there. I would expect maybe split reps between IPM and Keely Bullock. But you got to talk to Craig Naivar about Keely. What do you have to say?
Yeah, I think number 27 deserves more reps. As you said, Orlando said he's going to play a lot, and that's a big thing, and that'll be a storyline to watch moving forward. How much will they use number 27 out there, who looked great? Orlando said he looked seasoned out there. But props to the coaches, because they were the one who put that seasoning on him. And Craig Naivar, I asked him, were you nervous about throwing a true freshman out there and probably one of your most important safety spots in the absence of your 2-time captain and your multi-year starter in Isaiah Pola-Mao? And he was like, no, there was no resistance. There was no hesitation for me. We've started freshmen in the system before, and it's worked before. So Bullock has been preparing for this all spring, all fall. And like Isaiah told Keely, this is your time. This is your moment. This is what you've been waiting for. And that's kind of what Craig Naivar echoed to him. And, he was very complimentary of him. He thought he did well. He thought he did an amazing job. And, there was a couple things that he could have done better. But for the most part, he came ready to play. And I think that was what he was looking for. He knew that San Jose State was going to go after Keely, but, he stepped up and met the challenge. And he might have been nervous a little bit in the beginning, but, by the middle of the first quarter, he felt good. He looked confident, and that big 3rd and 2 stop he had, that's when he kind of knew, he's here to play, he's here to make plays, and that's what he did all Saturday.
Now, coming out of Tuesday's practice, we had circled USC's defensive line as a possible area of concern given the injuries that kind of stacked up at that position. First, Nick Figueroa with that AC sprain. He didn't practice on Tuesday. And then Jacob Lichtenstein came out early on Tuesday, but he returned on Wednesday. He did practice. Todd Orlando kind of brushed it aside. He said it's football, it's physical, and so I got to talk to Liechtenstein. And he said he's okay, but then Victor Otto kind of put any concerns to rest about Nick Figueroa when we asked about him, and he said he expects him to play on Saturday. And he was kind of questioned, well, why do you expect that? How do you know? And he said, well, he played all 6 games of the 2020 season with a torn labrum, so I'm pretty sure he can do this. That's pretty much what he said. So what are you expecting from those two, and what does USC get with those two actually in the lineup?
Fair point, Vic. Very fair point.
Yeah.
I mean, that was probably the biggest concern going in, just because you're going up against a Stanford offense that likes to run the ball. You need some physical guys in there, and Jake Lichtenstein and Nick Figueroa. I also like the combo that we named them, Nick Lick. Hopefully that catches on. But they're the most veteran defensive linemen that USC has on this unit. So that would have been a huge loss if both of them could not go out there, and it would have put Tuli Tuipulotu in an interesting spot to be moved around a lot. And we talked about it on Tuesday that he can play end, but there's just not a lot of depth there. So you needed at least one of them to be back. But now that it looks like you're going to get both of them back, that's an outstanding sign for this defense, and especially up front. And I'm sure Todd Orlando is very happy, and Vic Soto is very happy that they're going to get a really good rotational player in Jacob Lichtenstein, who showed that he can anchor the defense with one of them down. And then Nick Figueroa, who's just your veteran, your rock. He knows where to play. He does not need a full week of practice, because he knows what you're going to get out of Nick. He's going to be out there. He's going to give you everything you need, and that's something you're going to need against a physical Stanford offensive line. So that's a lot of great news coming out of Wednesday's practice for USC fans in that defensive line.
Mm-hmm. Now, David Shaw settled on a starting quarterback this week, and we got an interesting scouting report from someone who has a unique perspective of Tanner McKee, Corey Foreman. He played with him at Corona Centennial when he was a freshman. Tanner was a senior. What do you have to say today?
Yeah, obviously a reuniting of those two Huskies, and he said he was blessed to be able to play against a former Husky, and he also, like you said, gave a little bit of a scouting report. Tanner's a big kid. He's 6'6", about 250, and but Foreman said he's got some running ability. He can get out of the pocket, he can move, and he knows how to use his body. That's what he said. He's not afraid to use his body in different ways. He compared him to like Derrick Henry and how he kind of runs, and I think he meant that in sort of like a physical runner, and because he added, Tanner is not a quarterback that's just going to go down. He is not afraid to run over people, and I would agree with that. I mean, if I was 6'6" and 250 pounds, I would be running over anyone that I wanted. Okay. Anywhere, grocery store, get out of my way. DMV, get out of my way. Okay. So that makes sense. So I expect Tanner to come out there and be physical. If he's asked to take off, and I think this will be an interesting experience for Corey, because I'm sure he was never allowed to touch Tanner McKee in practice. So he could get his first career sack as a Trojan, and he could do it against his former QB, the one he was never allowed to put his hands on in high school. So that'd be an interesting thing. So he's excited for the matchup, and I think it's going to be a good matchup too. Tanner McKee, I was very high on him coming out of high school. He obviously took that 2-year Mormon trip. He looked, relative to everything that was going on with the Stanford offense, he looked like he was the lone bright spot out of there. So it's no brainer that Shaw went with him as the starter for this weekend. So I think it's going to be a good matchup, and it's going to be good for that defensive line, because as a big quarterback, they're a lot harder to take down. Yep. So they're going to have to wrap up and be physical when they're trying to get through, because he'll break tackles. So that's going to be an interesting matchup to watch.
Mm-hmm. Now, as we mentioned, USC is doing pretty well as far as injuries go. We did mention yesterday Gary Bryant returned to practice. He did practice again on Wednesday. And we also saw Darwin Barlow return again on Wednesday. How do you think USC is kind of situated heading into Saturday injuries-wise?
Yeah, I think they're in a really good spot. I mean, Darwin could add a little bit of juice in that running back room. I mean, it's good to have him back out there. We talked about it on Tuesday, and we talked about it over the weekend, how he warmed up on Saturday, but they pulled him back a little bit. Seems like he did about just as much as he did yesterday. Just in the first 50 minutes, obviously we can only watch that part, so he could have gotten a lot more work in the parts we could not see. But Gary Bryant is probably the bigger one. You want to see him stack continuous days. I mean, the hamstrings are tough. You don't want to have a setback, and Helton warned about it. Like, as long as he goes through the practice or the week healthy, we don't have any sort of little setback, he should be good to go. So that was a positive sign to have him out here again. And, he's the guy who could have real impact for this offense that is starving for a consistent number 2 wide receiver, and then someone on the punt return game, and then the kickoff game as well. Mm-hmm. He finished 22nd in the nation as a kickoff returner last year, so that's a boost there. Mm-hmm. And he's also a former Corona Centennial, so he's going to be out there with his not on obviously on the opposite sideline as Tanner, so it's a big Corona reunion of sorts. So yeah, good positive steps for those guys as well.
Mm-hmm. Alrighty, Chris, it's that time of the week. It's prediction time. How do you think this one is going to go on Saturday?
Under the bright lights of instant analysis, I do not know. I mean, USC, an 18-point favorite going into this one. I picked them to cover on Saturday. That barely played out well for me. So I think I'm going to pick that again. But score-wise, I think I'm going to go with 35-10.
Okay.
I feel like the Stanford...
Who's winning?
USC, sorry. 35-10 USC. Although I do reserve the right to say that the Stanford game is always wonky.
It is.
It's always crazy. But I'm going to go with 35-10. I think USC's offense gets a little bit more. I think the running backs find the end zone a little bit more. I think Gary Bryant helps out with the passing game a little bit, be a little bit more consistent, provide that energy. And I think the defense, they're going up against what I think is a pretty good quarterback, but I think they pretty much shut down that Stanford offense, much like the Kansas State defense did over the weekend or last weekend.
Mm-hmm. Alrighty, Chris, any final thoughts before we wrap up our first nighttime instant analysis?
It's spooky out here. It's spooky season. Halloween's next month, but this was a fun, and the king that is Shotgun Spratling should be returning soon, so I don't know when my next instant analysis appearance will be, but it has been fun being out here and stepping up for the team.
You definitely stepped up. Your number was called, and you definitely performed, so thank you for that. But that's going to wrap up instant analysis for USC's Wednesday practice of Stanford Week. For Chris Treviño, I'm Keely Eure. For more, check out uscfootball.com.